The response to my fledgling YouTube channel has been overwhelmingly positive. Thank you for your support. Many of the comments have included questions about the cost of living here in Costa Rica, so stay with me. In this video, I'll walk you through my bare bones $1,500 a month budget. Keep in mind that any budget analysis like this is going to be inherently flawed for a couple of reasons. One is that your spending habits and preferences and priorities are likely to be much different from mine. For example, I don't own a car. I spend next to nothing on what might be considered entertainment. Although I'm pleased with my apartment, I spend as little as possible on rent. I do have a budget kryptonite. I'm not a complete renunciate. I do overspend in one category. I'll get to that toward the end of the video. Now, when planning a budget in a foreign country, the biggest X factor is going to be the currency conversion, or the exchange rate, in this case from US dollars to Costa Rican colones. That exchange rate changes a little bit all the time. Over a long period, it can change a lot, and that is what in fact has happened over the last few years here. Now, because I'm a PowerPoint guy by trade, I've worked up a couple of slides to demonstrate the point. Every month for the last 5 years, my rent has been exactly the same, 160,000 colones. That hasn't changed, but what has changed, and quite significantly, is the exchange rate from dollars to colones. During the pandemic, the local economy was decimated due to the lack of tourists and foreign students. The local currency was devalued, and for those of us holding dollars, everything was cheap. Now the tourists and the students are back. The economy is booming, and it's the US dollar that's at a 30-year low. Long story short, at one point, my rent was the equivalent of $230, and now that the exchange rate has changed, I have to spend more dollars to get the same bang for the buck. My rent is the equivalent of $340. So let's move on to the budget numbers. Here are the budget categories I track in order of most expensive to least expensive. By far, my most expensive line item is the food budget. I spend more than necessary. There's an explanation. I want to save that until the end of the video. For now, let's move on to shelter. As I said, the rent is currently $340. There's about a $20 water bill and about $20 for electricity. Internet is free in the building. There's no need for heating or air conditioning here. It's the same temperature every day. So that brings the total for rent and utilities to $380. Now that I'm a legal resident of Costa Rica, I have the privilege and the obligation of participating in the government-run healthcare system. It's called Caja. The monthly amount I pay is based on a percentage of my Social Security pension, and that amount is $220 a month. Once I make that payment, everything else is provided free of charge. That includes doctor visits, medications, long-term care, emergency room, routine tests of all types, surgeries, even dental and vision are covered. For those of us from the United States, this takes a little getting used to because we don't have any such system. It also takes a little getting used to for those of us who aren't fluent in Spanish and didn't grow up in the system, because at times it can seem more complicated to get in to see the doctor than is actually necessary. So, in any case, more about that in a future video, but I do want to say that the system is a great benefit for the citizenry here, and I'm grateful to be allowed to participate. Regarding the phone, there are many recommendations out there about how to configure a phone plan so that it's possible to make local calls within a foreign country and still maintain the ability to call back to one's country of origin or elsewhere without incurring a lot of roaming charges and additional fees. I'm sure I'll hear those recommendations in the comments section, but here's what I did. I chose to keep my US number, and I think I have a couple of good reasons. One is that virtually all calls within Costa Rica are via WhatsApp. That includes social calls, restaurant reservations, doctor, dentist, businesses of all types. And I can do that for free with my US number on WhatsApp. Now, the only phone calls I make are back to the United States. Occasionally, I have to straighten something out with a US airline, my US bank, Social Security, and I do have a freelance client in New York City, so I want to maintain a familiar New York City number that they can use if they need to contact me. That hasn't happened yet, but I want it to be there anyway. So I kept my T-Mobile senior plan. The basic fee is $55 a month. There's a $15 international piece, and that's what allows me to avoid the roaming charges and hook into the T-Mobile affiliate here that's called Claro. Now, there is a 25-cent per minute international fee for calls back to the United States. It sounds like a lot, but really it's very unusual that I have to make those calls. Even if I'm on hold with FedEx for an hour, that still only adds up to another $15 for the per minute fee. With about $5 in taxes, the whole thing comes to $90 a month. I spend very little on transportation. Again, I don't own a car, so that's a big savings. I live near the city center, so I can walk into town in about 15 or 20 minutes. If I take the city bus, it's free because I'm now a legal resident and I have gray hair. Once in a while, I'll take an Uber into town if it's raining cats and dogs or if I'm going somewhere at night. So including a gratuity, that costs $3 or $4 one way. A couple of times a month, I'll take Uber to the farmer's market. That's about 2 miles away. It's a little too far to walk. And I'm carrying a lot of groceries on the way back. So that's about a $7 or $8 round trip. A couple of times a year, I'll make an airport run in an Uber, and that's a $30 round trip. So a generous estimate on the transportation is $40 a month. I have a post office box here at the historic main post office in downtown San Jose. That's about $4 a month. Also, I have a virtual mailbox in New York City, and that address allows me to open a US bank account, which is very important, so I can conduct business with PayPal, Social Security, and my freelance clients in New York. That address costs $16 a month, bringing the monthly total to $20 for mail services. Groceries are expensive here. Just about anything that's in a package, and even some fresh fruits and vegetables, are imported. Therefore, they're subject to a higher than average import tax. Additionally, some items are subject to sales tax, which is 13% at checkout. So there are a few workarounds. Some grocery stores are more budget friendly than others. We have a Costco here, it's called PriceSmart, and that's an excellent resource. And of course, there's the farmer's market, which is unmatched for high quality, low cost, and an authentic cultural experience. The rest of the story is that most of my nutritional intake comes from restaurants like this one. As long as there have been bachelors and as long as there have been restaurants, there have been bachelors going to restaurants and coming up with all kinds of magical ideas and logical leaps to justify the cost, such as think of all the electricity cost I'm saving by not opening my refrigerator and not firing up the stove, and the cost savings that comes from all that dish soap I don't use. All of it's a lie, of course, but there is a silver lining, and that is because I enjoy a strong, delicious cup of coffee first thing in the morning, that gives me the incentive to get up early and go through my morning routine, get outside, get some fresh air and sunlight and a little bit of exercise, and have a chat with the very friendly, knowledgeable, and passionate staff here at one of my favorite spots. Once I'm here enjoying the delicious coffee, I feel a little peckish, so I order up an omelet or a stack of pancakes, and by 8 a.m., my food budget for the entire day is busted. One month, in an attempt to save some money, I did make my own terrible coffee and prepared all of my food in my apartment. What a drag that was. But I got the food bill down to $450. On average, though, it's much closer to $650. That brings the total to $1,400. I'm going to add $100 for other expenses outside the routine. For example, at some point, I'm going to need a haircut and a new pair of sneakers. Occasionally, I'll make a Walmart run for anything household related. Same for our version of Home Depot. It's called EPA, and this is where I can get any tools or any hardware items. That's where I got this fire extinguisher and the dehumidifier. So with that factored in, it brings the total to $1,500. I hope this information has been useful. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching.